Thank you for being here, first of all. I'm Susan Kraft, as you probably know, and my studio is right around the corner on Sand Hill, 102 Sand Hill, if you want to come during Ghost or other times. So what we're going to talk about today is this style of painting. It's called flow, and I developed this technique by studying a new material that's out that crafters use to make pretty tables and things. And they call it a dirty pour if you want to look it up. But what I learned from them was how to handle the materials, these new materials called flow media. And here's one. You can come up and look at it if you want, pass it around. But this flow media comes in lots of sizes. And there's other material here called Floetrol, which is Floetrol, which professional wall painters use to keep the paint from drying too quickly. And the other thing that I use is this from Golden, of course, top of the line acrylic. Golden, this is GAC 800. And it's really just a retarder. They call it low crazing extender for pouring acrylics, so colors. So it's an extender. Don't worry about the crazing part. It's about just extending the flow time so it doesn't dry too quickly. Now, if you're doing a small piece like this, it doesn't matter because it doesn't take much time. But if you're doing a really large piece, like I have pieces as big as those two. And then you need to have a lot of slow time. So let's go through it. So sometimes I've stapled it wrong. So this is the first page here with the heavy lines on it. Basic supplies. So you can read through all this. I just showed you what the basic supplies are. Right? And of course you want gloves and you want to make sure your hair is tied back. And the most important thing about this, you can imagine, just like when you're pouring resin, or if any of you do what's it called with the wax? Encaustic. Because you've got this wet, damp surface on the table until it cures. So you don't want to have things like happened to me the first time I was working with this. In the middle of the night, my cat jumped up on the table. Left a nice cat footprint.
Was it nice looking, Elise?
I filled it in, but she had cat footprints around the house with this stuff, right? And then stuck between its pads, so it was a bad thing. And right down to my own hair or a dust particle coming in. And when you're working on a large piece, it's very disturbing. You know, it makes you want to just cry. So you want to make sure that your hair is tied back or a hat is on. I actually wear a whole clean suit that you can buy at Lowe's, like the painters sometimes wear, right down to the footies. Or your shoes will get ruined eventually. Because when you're working on the floor, it's all over. So let's go through the, I'll pass this around because there's things in here to notice, like the little circles. Here, Joanne, there's more things like this on the table over there. So what you want to do when you're starting to pour, you've got your stiff media that your base you're pouring onto. Can't use a canvas. Well, your canvas is really small and you put something to support it because this stuff is very heavy. It will cause a dent and everything will pool in the middle and it's not very good looking. So you want to have a stiff, like wood, or maybe what I've done with the larger pieces, I stripped off the canvas and got some aluminum put on the just attached with way you want it, whatever way you want to attach things, your favorite way of gluing things on. And then underneath those, whatever surface you choose to paint on, you first of all you need to protect your floor, and now you put dowels down, maybe 2 inches wide and longer than the painting is wide, and you put the piece down on those dowels, and when you pour your layer on, you want to tip it to have the paint go where you want. Now I like to paint in kind of stripy versions, as you can see, right? So I put the paint on and then I tip it till it runs across, and you get your first layer down. And usually I just do a couple layers. So it kind of mimics what I do with the larger paintings. Light on the top, darker on the bottom. It's a nice base. Let that dry, let it cure. This is acrylic, it cures. And in here, if you turn to the second page here, which might be your first and some people, basic pouring mixture. So 1 part acrylic paint, 4 to 10 parts pouring medium. Depending how thick you want or how transparent or translucent you want your base to be. So with the base, you want 4 parts pouring medium as you mix it together with your acrylic paint. And you take your acrylic paint, usually I use the liquid flowing acrylic paint, but you can use right out of a tube. You just thin it out with the more golden thinning medium. So it's pretty heavy duty. You use a lot of material for this. So, and I buy these containers, right? They're just empty. They're like ketchup containers. Or I save these and I reuse these so I can pour. And I will build up a series of my palette. I'll pick the 4 colors I'm using and the densities. And they're all lined up and ready to go. Because once you start pouring, it's a race. Nothing can stop you. Nobody should come in your private room. Your floor is covered, you're all covered, and you start pouring. You've got gloves on too. You start pouring, nothing can stop you because it's going to screw up your layer. So you put your first layer down, it's nice and dense color. Let that cure, come back a day or 2 later, depending on how big it is and how many layers you have underneath. Then you do the next layer, which of course would have now would be like maybe 8 parts of the pouring medium to 1 part of the color. So it's more translucent, so you can have layers that come through, like in this one. So you can see here I started pouring one way and the next time I poured the other way. Not the next time, there's probably 5 layers on here. But I wanted to have that cross hatching kind of look. And this is the most extreme I've done. And you really have to have this one pretty secure, or it will, you can adjust, you can manipulate the lower one a little bit, right, when you put it on too fast. Plus it won't dry very well. It needs to cure 1 layer at a time. Hey Marcy. Hi. So this layer up here, this top layer, what actually you can see at the bottom is, this is the bottom layer that's coming through. This dark layer down here is probably 3 layers down. So anyway, so the top layer is very, very thin, and it's probably only 1 part color to the rest of it. So you just have this little bitty layer, and it's so minimal that the white of the uncured flow media will turn the whole bottle white. So it's up to you to leave a marker on there. What is in here and what is the percentage? So you have to be kind of meticulous, almost like when you're cooking, or if you're doing any experiments, you have to be really careful about what you're doing. And what I actually do before I do bigger pieces like this, I have really small pieces, like 4 by 5. And I experiment on those to see how it's going to look. And those turn out to be nice gifts. You know, housewarming at birthdays or whatever. Or you can continue on and build it up to a nice painting, just a small painting for miniatures. So where's the piece that I put out there? Y'all move it around? Okay. So let's talk about this dot here. Dot here and a dot here. Okay. That comes from another thing you can add, and that is silicone oil. Or you can use soap. Or you can use water. Each one of them reacts a little bit different, but what it does is breaks down the paint, because that's what you use to clean, right? Oil gets off acrylic from your fingers, or soap and water. So it just breaks it apart. So if you have one of your bottles, I usually make a smaller one, I'll put some of that stuff in here. I might have a really small bottle. And then I put 1 layer of that in there. And then it just reacts. It starts to just come apart. So a really cool one, and I wish I could show it to you, but I sold several of them already and I didn't do any more. I did the first layer, the ground pretty much, black. Close to black, Payne's gray. And then I put some other colors on it and made them rather thin. I did put that everywhere. And then the top layer, I did backwards. I put colors first. So you did this when you were a kid, right? You colored everything in red and blue and green. Then you color black on top, and then you scratch through and you get the colors to come through. It's the same idea. So you put colors on the base, and then you mix the silicone oil into the Payne's gray or black, whatever you want, ivory black, and you pour that on the top, and it just opens up, and it looks like it's some sort of like a star clusters. Because then you put another layer of a white, like you have here, very pale, very thin white on top of that. So you've got kind of this hazy sky pattern. And it's very cool, but it's very nichey. So if you want to do that, probably really good for Instagram or some sort of online sales, because it's very nichey, but it wouldn't really work in a regular community. But it does work for people that finally get to know you and they want that one thing. So that's an idea if anybody likes to do that kind of thing. It's pretty cool, actually. It's really beautiful. So that is pretty much the end of the talk, but if you have any questions, or if you see anything on here that you want to talk about.
I got a question.
Yes.
Obviously, painting in oil or watercolor is simple. What you're doing is not even close to being simple. So what drew you to something that is labor intensive?
Well, that is a metaphysical question.
They all are.
Because I had a show coming up, now it's summertime, I had a show coming up in February, like now almost. And I thought I'll bring up my trusted pieces, because big pieces take a long time to sell. I thought I'll bring up these guys, be great, and I'll paint a few more new ones, and I'll just have my favorites plus a couple of new ones, and that's it. Except, in August, I kept getting woken up at 3 in the morning with an inspiration to go onto YouTube and look for these dirty pour things. Like I was you know when you're kind of sleepy and you just get this thing, and over and over and night after night after night, I kept watching these dirty pour shows until I got to the one where this lady was really great at giving instruction on how to set it up, and all this stuff here, that's from her or somebody like her, right? And then what's the ingredients? How do you put it together? She was very technical. So I started to try the dirty pours, which was kind of cute for like a week, and then you're like, well, now what? So then once I started to understand how the material worked, once you understand how to use your materials, you can do anything artistic, right? You can take spoons and forks and a solder gun and make birds, right? You can do anything. If you're creative, you can take any material. So it's a new material type. I just went for it, and I'll tell you that show was mostly, I worked nonstop. I was crazed. I didn't have enough room in my studio. I had to rent a storage space that was it was advertised being clean. And they were very clean. And I just covered the floor, and I did some big pieces like this. I actually ordered 2 because I needed more room. So I had all my studio, these two spaces in the storage place, and I was working nonstop on these pieces, and I just couldn't help myself. I was driven. And so I called the show Breakthrough, because it was a breakthrough. And all my friends that knew me for decades as artists, they'd say to me one at a time, don't go back, just stay with this. This is it. This is your thing. Just keep doing this. So, yeah.
So do you see it as intentional or accidental?
I see it as a...
I mean, if you're thinking of this as images or landscape.
Okay. What are those? I use the same formula. I use the dark and the light, and it's just abstract, because I've been doing this for a really long time. So, but then I like to have the crosshatch. So I like doing landscapes. I used to do landscapes before I went to abstract, and then went to this. It's kind of a combination, but whatever that wants to do. Now, I cannot control this stuff. This in the corner here, this nice little sun in the corner, that was not supposed to be a sun in the corner. It was supposed to be more like this. But it showed up, and I went, oh, all right. And so I added some, I kind of turned it more into a seascape with putting the white there on the edge, and so I just pushed it that way. So it's really, you take what shows up, and then with the last couple layers, you can manipulate it a little bit to give it some sort of meaning. Some people, I see this as a landscape or a seascape, other people see it as something else. So it just, the gravity just pulled it off. So use your knowledge of how fluids move, and these are non-Newtonian fluids, which is like egg yolk. That doesn't quite move like water. Paint moves. So you can do that. You can sit there, and so you got these big pieces, right? You're just walking around, you're just moving around like this, right? It's very unelegant, and you're waiting. You're just literally waiting for paint to slowly move across the canvas. When you got big ones like that, it could take 5 minutes for it to get across. And you're hoping that it isn't dry, which is why you want to have enough this stuff and this stuff, especially when you're working with larger pieces, which also then makes it longer to cure. So it'll take longer. Hey, Meadow! I'm sorry. Come here.
I forgot my sling, so I...
Okay, all right. So that's... These are the materials I use to make these wall paintings, and this is a list. Oh. Once they're several years old, they're pretty indestructible. They really are. And if you do get old, you could have that one. if they do get a little dent on them, you can just pour another top layer on it. Cause they, like all acrylics, they never dry, cause they're curing. So if you lean it against another one, accidentally, they'll stick. Or if you lean it against something with a texture for enough time, like 3-4 months or 5 months or a year, you'll get an indent.
Bubble wrap.
Yeah. So I actually have my largest one is 7 feet long and 4 feet wide, and it's in my studio right now. It has one little patch of some sort of a imprint, and probably from one of the times we moved. So it's waiting for me to pour. Now, if you look at this, if you look at the pouring mix ratio, but also look at the pouring mixture calculations by canvas size. It's 4 ounces per square inch. No, 1 ounce per square inch. Right, 1 ounce per 4 square inches. 1 ounce. So when you have 7 feet by 5 feet, that's 600 ounces with 600 square inches. 650, I think. And so that is a quarter of that ounces. I had to buy a I had this. I had 4 of these. I went, all right, I'm ready. And then I did this for this talk, and I went, oh, I better get a gallon. They come in this tubs. Yeah. And you just have to figure out how you're going to handle the materials like Dave asked about. So I use a funnel. I don't know, I've got a funnel there so I can funnel the gallon into these jars so I have them all ready. I never just take it right out of the gallon because it's not mixed. It's just raw flow media. The other thing is, I always use Liquitex for flow media, even though I love golden. Their golden materials I think are the best, highest quality, at least they were, pre-COVID. And, but their flow media doesn't mix with color well. It's really meant to just be a layer on top. It's not meant to be part of a whole process. Because when you mix that up, I don't know if any of you have ever shaken varnish, think you need to shake it up. You get all those little bubbles in that last forever. That's what happens to their flow media. So don't use their stuff except for the very top layer, which you can put that on the top layer. You can mix those medias. It's acrylic, it's all acrylic. Any other questions?
I have a question.
Yes.
Could you suspend stuff in the material, like in each layer? You could put things in it and then keep layering it up.
You could. Sometimes I paint
Yeah.
under there.
Right.
And, yeah, and so I base it on a painting. Yeah.
And how long does each layer take to dry? Depends on the thickness, I'm sure.
Yeah, well, yeah, because it starts to get thicker and thicker. Some I'll have like 15 layers because I might have not done the right ratio, so it's too dense and it covers up what I had before. It's like, oh, I gotta start over again. So it can take months for it to cure all the way if you keep going.
But you can layer, it gets like it dries enough so you could do a second layer.
Yeah, you can do that in 2 days.
2 days.
And if you want to keep it warm, if it's cold and damp, it takes longer, of course, right?
Right.
So yeah, 2 days is nice and firm, and it won't be affected. Yeah. So if you like, for me, when I did this show, and I did all these paintings in 6 months or so, and some of them were pretty raw. They still had a lot to cure, and they did experience trouble because, especially the larger ones, that when I packed up, and I had this big, huge box from Uline, and it was for electronics, so it had an egg carton sort of cushion in there, and it just stayed. I didn't think about it. It stayed there for like maybe a month, and then it had these dents. So I had to put another layer on it. And it was okay. And I thought, it's kind of cool, but nah, that's not what I want. So you can do it on purpose if you want to. So
Print,
yeah, so you can dent it if you want to, but I don't know if you want to.
So Susan, these other ones over here, they're not the flow, they're the, like abstract,
Yeah,
landscape?
Those are from like the early 2000s. Yeah.
And is that, it's related to this one, right?
Correct, they're in the same series. It's called Dreamscape series. Yeah. Any other questions?
Did you talk about how you got in the center when you were doing a giant one? How did you get the stuff done and flowing the way you wanted in the center?
Oh, well, yeah, like one that size?
Well, that you could reach the
Yeah.
center. but
No, I
that's
don't
like a
have,
bigger
I don't have
one.
any ones. I only have ones that are longer than that. I don't have anything wider than 4 feet.
Okay.
Yeah, because if you're down on the ground and you're just picking it up, and but when you're when you're trying to pour over it, that's pretty, I don't have a 4-foot reach, so I kind of have to fling it, so sometimes it does pass up on the wall, and so it does, because you've got this, you've got these little ketchup bottles, or you got this, and you're pouring, you want it to be even, so you're trying to, it gets, technically, it's weird, right, because you're trying to get a nice even line across, and it does kind of just flick off, so.
You need to find a way to suspend you from the ceiling.
That would be nice, yeah, if I was suspended, yeah. Yeah. Susan, why do you have a, in the middle of your studio, what do you do in your studio? This is for painting, this is for painting.
Where's your one?
You have a harness, yeah, you know, but it's for painting. Yeah, so it does kind of limit you on how far you can go. Yeah, okay.
And you couldn't get the same effect just by painting?
No,
You mean the glass like kind of?
like that in the layers?
No, just if you were looking at it from a distance, just the lines and the.
Well, I suppose you could, if you can be meticulous about it, but, I kind of stopped being a meticulous painter when I went to the abstract, because you can see these large paintings that are up against the window, those are watercolor and, pastels that I did, in the 1990s.
The horses.
Horses, yeah, I was a big horse nut when I was a kid growing up. I thought I was gonna be, when I was a kid, I thought I'd be a horse trainer and an artist, that was my dream. And then I grew up and said, hey, I'm here. And they go, yeah, you want like the $2 an hour? What do you want? Can you do this on spec? It's like, no. So, yeah, so it stayed with me for a while.
So when did you do that, like the one behind Marcy there, like that one?
That's Ariana's.
Oh, that's all right, oh.
Yeah, so she has the flowers and the, yeah. So her name is up there on the wall?
Yes,
Yeah.
I'm sorry, okay.
Wow, that's so different than your other ones.
Yeah,
Yeah.
She's varied by year, it looks like. If you go to her website, she's got, every year she's got a different set of art that she.
Yeah, the landscapes are, and the floral work are a little bit older, an older body of work, or like, you know.
Oh, you do
work,
artists.
yeah,
Yeah.
so I'll focus, I'll get, you know, a general idea in mind to create a whole body of work on it, and then, you know, I move on. It's like, you know, people want you to write an artist statement, I'm like, but my statement changes, like, in a couple of years, I'm on to something.
And I write articles for each series.
Yeah.
Actually, when I look back at the series, I realized it was me, it's like a painting biography of that era of my life, like what was I going through? And, so this one, when I started painting this, I just came through a really hard time in my life that lasted for a really long time, almost a decade. And so it's like, oh, I'm in the flow now. What's really weird is that I keep getting matched up with being in the flow. Like right now, for technical work, I'm working on stuff called flow. All day long, I'm just typing flow. So it's like, flow. Yeah, it's workflow or flow. The flow is the thing that they made called flow. So it's just, I'm constantly in the flow. Yeah. And this stuff is called flow media, so you just like can't get away from it. So.
When did the one be up, that one?
These are mine too. So this one is, that was from a series between that one and this one. That was when I was really sick and in a lot of pain, and I had lost my science ability, and so I was trying to get back into it. So it's very planet-based, right? So my scientific background has to do with planets and stuff. So I was getting back into mathematics, like geometric patterns and planets and stuff. So, yeah.
So I know I missed the beginning of the talk, so you might have talked about this, but it sounds like you're applying this mixture by kind of squeezing it or pouring it on, right?
Yeah.
And then it takes a certain amount of time to spread out, almost like if you had poured like maple syrup or honey or
Yes,
something.
exactly.
Same as a resin.
The
So
resin.
does it like with, cause I pour resin sometimes, so, you know, it'll slowly spread, but I mean, so slowly I couldn't stand there and watch it. I leave it like overnight.
Right.
It drips off is it
Yes,
the same thing
exactly,
with this?
exactly.
It takes that long
It does.
and then it evens itself out
Yes.
beautifully, so that's.
So you just want to make sure there's no holes left in there. So I will, sometimes I'll nudge it a little bit, sometimes there'll be a bubble. So you can pop the bubble yourself.
Does heat work like it does
Yes,
with resin?
yes.
Yeah,
So I
because I use a little torch.
I have a torch, I've got
Yeah.
a torch, yeah, 'cause I used to do it in caustic, so I have the torch from caustic.
Right.
But that puts a skin on it immediately. So you as long as it's not moving anymore, that's okay. But if it's still moving,
I
it's
see.
gonna have these little weird
And that's the
Wrinkles.
difference between the acrylic and the resin. I mean, cause the resin, you could heat it and pop those bubbles and it doesn't make any skin. It takes a much longer time to move and dry.
So that's why
It's not plastic.
I use my finger
Yeah.
to get rid of those bubbles.
Yeah.
But there's not very many bubbles, it's very rare to get a bubble.
There's a difference between a heat gun and a torch?
Well, a torch is more, focused,
Okay.
you know, and a heat gun, so the crafters that use this for their, what they call the dirty pour, they use it to move the paint around. They do it on purpose. I think they must use a lot of
Right,
flow
then you
draw.
have air.
Yeah, they probably use a lot of
Yeah.
this to keep it very liquidy. And they only do one layer, you know, and they do all sorts of, they put
Beads.
gold and beads in there, and they've got this table round with edges, so they can, it's almost like they treat it almost like resin, yeah.
Right, yeah, the heat guns have a little air coming out.
They
So
do.
that's what moves things around, but
Exactly.
a torch is just
Heat.
Heat.
Yeah, they use the air guns.
Focus,
It
and
doesn't
you have, you
move
can
it.
have a little teeny weeny
I mean, you can
torch.
move it, but
Right,
it doesn't
like a
blow.
jeweler's torch.
Yeah,
Yeah, I
Yeah.
should probably own a jeweler's torch to be better.
well, it's not it's also, you can do a creme brulee.
Yeah.
Yeah, there you
Yes,
go.
that's
So
right.
That's the kind I have.
The creme
That's what
brulee
they use for
torch.
creme brulee. That's the kind I have, is the creme brulee torch.
Yeah,
But the jewelers have a really small torch,
yeah,
so,
and the glass people, you know,
Bigger torch.
people that do,
yeah.
they have a teeny weeny, they actually wear it around their neck, and
Oh,
it's a
wow.
really teeny weeny
For,
torch.
yeah, adjustments, it's good.
Yeah.
Yes,
Did you say that if it should develop a texture from something that leaned on it, or, you know, before it was completely cured? Did you say that by just putting another coat over it, that it would just,
yeah,
you wouldn't see it at all?
Right.
Or notice it at all?
no, you can just, it just blends right in, it's just, like, it just absorbs. So, they, and you can
Why do
also,
you think that is? Why?
because acrylic never really dries, it's continually curing, so molecularly, they just blend in, they just merge.
It fills it in, right? Kind of
Yeah, so it
fills
fills it in, gravity makes things flat, but the dent and the surface of the old version and the new version, they just meld, they become one. You'd never be able to split it apart. It's not like a geologic formation between the rock layers.
Right.
So I had a really large one like this, and it was shiny. So I do it like this one. And it was too shiny for that big. And where are you gonna have a shiny piece that big? Most people have windows. So before I sold it, I put another layer on it and let it cure for 6 months. Somebody wanted it and I had to ship it. Well, I shipped it, which means there's ingredients inside it. I let it cure, I think, was it 6 months, a year? I can't remember, it's a long time. But I let it cure. I had painted it, well, back then, so 2019, so it'd been a long time, so it was pretty solid. And it worked out. Yeah.
So will eventually cure.
Acrylic never cures all the way. It's always curing, right?
Well, I don't know whether there's a difference between the paint and that kind of a layer.
Well, it's acrylic media at the core, so I think that
Some of my acrylic older paintings are pretty stiff now.
yeah,
They're-
but you would not
they're
still would
flat.
put something in it, you would put anything rubber against it or another acrylic painting against it, still, eventually
It would attach itself.
Eventually, they do attach themselves. So, but the younger it is, the faster they attach. When it's really old, when it's like 20 years old or more, it would take longer. You know, you could do it for a day or two if you had to, but you wouldn't want to store it that way. Yeah. And oh yeah. So the other thing about these, when you do make these, and they're cured for a substantial amount of time, I would cure them for at least 3 months before you show them, because people will buy them and take them home, and you want that surface to be strong. So you use a glassine paper over it. That's the only thing that does not interact with the surface. And it has to be nice, not reused, no crinkle in it, has to be absolutely flat. And you get them in large rolls, 48 inches, which is another reason to limit your painting to 48 inches wide. So you can get this, or you can get, bakers use them too in smaller pieces, so if you do small pieces.
You can get glassine 6 feet.
Why?
Yeah.
Oh, there you go. Okay.
The thing is that with glassine, I roll my paintings backwards when I'm storing them.
Oh,
And the glassine has attached to it.
really?
Yeah, I mean, after, I've had my paintings,
Okay.
you can wet it and get it off.
Okay, that makes sense.
Because the glassine just kind of
Dissolves.
dissolves itself.
But glassine is the thing you put on these, and you use glassine for encaustic as well.
You could use an oil-based varnish on top of acrylic paintings too, to add that extra layer to it.
There you
and then
go,
you're
right,
not gonna
this-
have that problem.
Oil on top of acrylic every time, you can do that. No, you can't do that.
You can do oil-based varnish. You do like
Oil-based varnish.
varnishes. You know, you can buy acrylic varnishes, right?
Uh-huh.
You can also do it varnishes.
I don't think you can do anything, oh, it's for oil paintings, it's not oil-based. Cause
It's
that's,
for oil paintings, yeah, I'm
Okay.
not entirely sure what they
okay,
do.
so it can't be oil, cause you can't have, you gotta have water on top of oil, not the other way around.
I
But-
will say, I have not tried this, but I know other acrylic
Okay,
artists
so
that
oil-
use that method.
So that's good, so oil, varnishes for oil paintings will help keep those from being sticky and other things. But then you've got brush marks. Or
Yeah,
unless you
you can
spray,
spray, but there's pros and cons.
if you're gonna spray, yeah, you gotta be a good sprayer, yeah. Gotta get
Board
rid of
on
things.
there, for the board.
Yeah,
There you go, same thing, but I don't,
are you gonna talk, I hope? No, I mean, I'm happy to answer questions. This came together very last minute for us, so, and I did not have time to prepare a talk, but I am happy to answer questions about the pieces if anybody has.
any other questions about the flow process and paintings? Well, I think that's it, then thank you very much for coming and listening to my talk. And, contact me if you try this and you have any questions or you want to come see what I've got, before you go, or, you know, I'm glad to help anybody that wants to try this new style. No one else knows how to do this, right? 'Cause this came through me and I figured it out, so I'm happy to share. I don't want to be the only one doing this, it'd be kind of weird. I'd love to have other people do it. Yeah, so, you know, I don't have any nobody's gonna paint the same, right? Everyone paints differently. So, don't worry about copying, there's no copy. If you wanna try copy, that's how you learn, right? You copy first, and then your own style comes out. Nobody wants to copy. The odds, just learning, right? That's what you do. So, anyway, thank you again.